not gonna have much payment for a long time, and they'll be all over us, asking us, why didn't you let this, why did you let this happen? And so, that's what I would recommend. We split it and we decide what we're gonna do, because one of the things that, the other part, as the engineers are looking at, the pipes have been in for 100 years, okay? We're planning on putting new piping and new underground infrastructure that we hope they're gonna last for at least 50 to 100 years more. So that also takes into demographics, future growth, all that other stuff that's involved. So I just hope we don't get so tangled up in the weeds that we don't address some of these problems that are confronting us right now.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Randy?
Agreeing with both councilors to this point, one thing that the council and the committee we haven't had a really good breakdown of what infrastructure needs to be done. We've generically heard, but when constituents call me and ask, I'm like, we haven't had a formal presentation of the council or of a committee at this point. So, but I'm not disagreeing. I think common sense would say the infrastructure is, over 100 years old and it's probably going to have to be done. But also the question is, and I agree with Councilor Roberts, I mean, we can't put this off much longer. However, what was looking like about a $7 million project, from what I can hear, it looks like anywhere between a $10 and a $12 million project. And the elephant in the room is, how are we going to pay for this? And I think, all of this is infrastructure. I agree, the above ground part, that's a separate elephant in the room, and we'll have to get to that. But for the basic infrastructure, once again, what absolutely has to be done, and how are we going to pay for this? And I think those are questions that the council is going to need sooner than later.
Phil? Just use your mic. I'm reminding everybody again that you have to use your microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm agreeing with what everyone said so far. I think most of us agree that we have to do something with the infrastructure. What I'm looking for right now is, and of course I don't want it tonight, is dollar signs. How are these projects going to be paid for? Is there grants? Are we going to bond? Are we going to create a TIF district? Are we going to create a 79E? In the past few years, we've had to raise our water rates, our sewer rates, and our parking rates in order to balance those budgets. How are they going to be affected? Because they're all affected by this project too. I mean, we got to put in new water pipes, and I don't know if it's coming from a reserve fund or if it's going to affect the rates. And also, yes, how much is it if we just do the infrastructure? What will that cost? Now we have these nice projects for the top. What would they cost? What if we did a hybrid? What if we did just one section of that part? What if we just did another? It's just dollar signs that need to be answered, because these are the kinds of answers I can't give my constituents, and that I would like to know. And of course, I know you're not ready for that tonight.
Thank you. Yes, Raleigh?
Thank you. One of the measures that you normally see when cities are doing water infrastructure projects, which I haven't seen yet, is the percent leakage. So let's say that you start out with 100,000 gallons at the pump station. By the time it gets to this point, you could lose 30 or 50%. And that's one measure that I'll be looking for when we get this data, is what the leakage rate is. And so the leakage goes back into the water table, of course, but you still pay the energy cost for pumping that water as well too, and that's totally waste. And if it's sewage that's leaking, that's even worse. So I'd be really interested in the leakage rates in any part of the infrastructure that in the downtown or in the whole city.
Good. Anybody else? Yes?
Subject of infrastructure. You're talking about cost and time, absolutely. I need more information other than it's old. I mean, there's people around here that are old, that are still functional. I'm downtown every day. I do not recall seeing an awful lot of water breaks or other catastrophic issues. I want some history. I want to know just exactly how urgent is this. I'm pretty sure that by the time we get around to it, yeah, we're going to be convinced. But as I think Council Filio said, we need to be able to explain to our constituents what exactly we're spending the money on. And to make you feel a little easier, Councilor Omerod, we had the sewer lines relined, so they are not leaking. So that's a good thing. And that was supposed to last a good long time, but I guess that doesn't matter. I want to see the history. I want to know how long it's going to take to do the project. I think of my own business. I have a building from 1893. It's probably as old as a lot of the water lines. Yep, they're old. I would love to replace them all, but financially it just doesn't really work. And I think that's kind of where we are also, that we are responsible to the taxpayers and to the water users and the sewer users. Does it need to be done? Does it all need to be done? And if the answer is yes, then definitely we need to do it, but it's expensive. And then we'll get on to the other issues. A lot of the other conversation this evening, I'm going to be oddly silent because eventually this is coming to MSFI, and I don't want to hear, oh, I have previously spoken on a topic and I'm prejudiced or something. So just because I'm not speaking, it doesn't mean that I have nothing to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Giacomo.
Raleigh actually took part of what I was thinking as well with the leakage rates. I know some cities, for instance, New York City has reports of as much as 70% leakage from the waters coming down from the Catskills down into the city, and so it can be real significant. And I would be interested. The sewage leakage, yeah, hopefully we don't have any of that, but water leakage happens, and not only do we pay the pump price and things like that, but that's how sinkholes happen. And if you want to see an expensive project that is not expected by downtown merchants, sinkholes have a way of appearing quite suddenly, and costing an immense amount of money because it's reactionary funding for that. It's not a planned funding. So I feel like we've been given a lot of the information that people are asking for. Maybe I'm wrong, or maybe you're asking for additional information above what we've been given, but we've been told the age of most of the pipes. We've been shown pictures of some of what the inside of those pipes look like. We know that, and there are maps in the presentations that outline exactly which pipes are getting replaced. So I'm a little surprised that so many councilors are saying we need to know this information. I'm pretty sure we've been presented with it already. So beyond that, though, I think with the infrastructure, this is an ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure, and though the ounce is a very huge number, imagine how much larger that pound is if we have a catastrophic failure downtown. We remember Avon Street. That pipe was the same age as some of the pipes on Main Street. So if we want some context there, we don't want to see another incident like that, especially in an area that is traveled by a lot more cars and has a lot more population moving through there.
Thank you. Yep, Bettina.
Yeah, we have been given quite a bit of information, and there are still questions. And I have a feeling we can mostly agree that the infrastructure is in need. The rest of it, I feel like we cannot make this decision in a vacuum. We have a lot of high-ticket, high-priced items that we have discussed over the last few years during capital improvement project review. And, they're talking about $5 or $7 million for a fire station out in West Keene, and we're talking about, every time we do something, we take away a little bit of the parking. And that's going to force us into a parking garage, which is another $5 or $6, $7 million on Gilboa Ave, And there's all these other projects that we cannot just sit here and say, well, we would love to have this, this, and this. What do we need, and how much of a tax burden are we creating? And grant money, most of the time we've been able to secure it. There's no guarantee that we can secure it. However, That's, my concern is like, we have to look at all these other expenses. And again, when we create these changes in downtown, how it ripples out. You know, again, we keep taking away more and more parking. You know, we had, the courthouse was built, and there was a big parking, lot over there, and we took some of that away. We enhanced the parking on Gilboa Ave at the cost of losing spaces. And we all love the quality of life that we have in Keene. You know, it attracts us. But if the tax burden becomes too high, you know, I just don't see, we're gonna squeeze a lot of people out that just can't afford to live here. And, you know, we've been gifted a property on Ashwelot Street that is going to become a park, most likely, and might have to buy playground, might have to hire more people to maintain. We traded some land on Water Street, and we're enlarging Carpenter Street. Yes, that's going to enhance the neighborhood, and it's going to offer a lot of people different activities. And we're going to increase the usage of Wheelock Park, because we're going to have the disc golf, is that called disc golf, right? And each of those things that we add is going to require maintenance, it's going to require equipment, and it's less land that's on the tax roll. And so, you know, I just think we need to think of the bigger picture. Like, infrastructure is definitely in need and a concern, and I support that 100%. But I am concerned about how much we're gonna spend on enhancing. I mean, we already have a nice downtown. We have lots of trails. We keep increasing the trails. All of those things attract people, and they're about the quality of life. But we also have to balance that with the taxes and what we're putting on our citizens, what we're asking them to do. And, you know, is it, you know, how much is gonna come back on them? So that's my concern.
So it sounds like for at least this first bullet point, I'm hearing, show me the money, show me the details for the infrastructure, additional details about the existing infrastructure and liabilities that may exist there. Everyone feel good about that? Yeah, Tom?
I think it's a little tough to ask you, ask the staff.
Yes, ma'am. To tell us how much money, because I really get the feeling that they're going around in circles now. We're coming up, different ideas, different thought processes here. And what we have is a concept here. And when you have a concept, you can't really tell somebody to tell you how much it's gonna cost, because we don't know what it is. And I think maybe we gotta, as much as I wouldn't want to do this, but I think it's a reality, we need to break this down in a couple of segments here so that we can either move on or not move on or concentrate on one particular area. And obviously, we've got pretty much agreement that the infrastructure is an issue. So I think we got to sit there. You know, I tried to go backwards a little bit to see what happened. And my understanding is in 1980, there was some major work down there. I know in 88 was a major project. There was something else done that put the little island lower than Emerald Street. And then the roundabout was done. Those are all major projects, but in none of those, any water and sewer underground was taken care of. The common word I hear is, well, we didn't want to spend the money. So now this council is faced with trying to make that decision. I hope it wouldn't do what those four other councils did and said, no, we're not going to do it. We'll just do part of it. So if we were to concentrate for the first couple of weeks on dealing with this, with the infrastructure issues, and make everybody comfortable that we need to do it. I mean, I believe it's got to be done. I mean, it just makes sense that you put something in the ground 100 years, you got to deal with it. My biggest concern about that at this point, and it probably can be defined, is we're stopping at Water Street. I think we got to go another 200 feet at least to the roundabout and make sure that whole section is taken care of, so that some future council doesn't have to deal with it. And once we have an idea, maybe then we could ask the council to tell us how much that might cost and when it might cost that amount. And at the same time, if there are things above ground that we want to deal with, then we could deal with that. But we're starting to spin a little bit here. That's my concern at this point. And we're only on item 1, so.
Brian? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real brief, I think it'd be good to have a better understanding of the full timeline and what's possible within that timeline. So it sounds like right now we're potentially delaying this to 2025. And the plan is to do 3 years, knowing that inflation is a factor in this. Is there a way to condense this into just 2 seasons rather than 3? Can we play around with how that would actually work? So be interested in the timeline of it.
And I'm just gonna editorialize a little bit what I imagine. I don't think the staff's gonna be able to provide you a detailed budget of all these options and what these costs will be, but maybe like some kind of high-level model, so that when you're talking to people, you can say, this is how Concord funded their project. We can all assume that ours might be funded in a similar way, and this is how that kind of breaks down.
And we have money set aside.
Right. So I think a better understanding of that would be good for everybody. And then same thing with the timeline. Can we provide a high-level model? Obviously, things are gonna change depending on the options and all this other stuff, but these projects have been done other places. We should have some idea of what our options really are. I'm gonna go to Gladys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate hearing everybody's comments. Is there a computer program project that could help us see this without having to dig? I mean, you know, when you go into the oceans, they find ways to help you see what's down there. I don't know, is there something that could really? That's my question, really, because it seems like there ought to be, with everything else the way there's computer programs to make it work. And it would be nice if we had something that we could see.
Okay. Yep, good. Yep.
Thanks. I want some detail. I don't want to hear a number that came out of the CIP from 5 years ago. We know costs have changed. If you want to put in a bathroom in your house, you're going to get a price from a plumber. This is a bigger project, obviously, but it is possible, probable, and definitely expected we can get a real number without needing all the final design details. A real number and a real timeline. As Councilor Lake was saying, the timeline, this is a variable that has been brought up. We can accelerate the construction. There are ways of doing it in less than 3 years, and I think that's critical. These are numbers we need, and I'm not in such a rush to do this project. I want to make it clear. I want to have all the information to make the decision, and if it takes an extra month for Public Works or purchasing or whatever to get the information, so be it. But we need the information, not just it's old, and here's the number that we've been carrying as a placeholder since I can remember.
Yep.
So following up on those comments too, something else that I would like to understand, because I feel like as we're making these decisions, I want to have the whole picture. And as each of us speaks, I think the important part of us all being together doing this is that, someone is going to trigger an idea that will help us all think about this project differently. So I know that we've heard from a lot of the Main Street businesses about their concerns about how they're going to keep their businesses open. And what is going to help us make these decisions about whether we would like to do an accelerated timeline or not, I'm sure, is we're going to need to know, what would the above ground interruptions look like if we do an accelerated timeline versus a 3-year timeline? Because if we're shutting everything down and there's no parking and we all just grin and bear it, we might lose every downtown business. If we do it in small pieces and we still have detours and parking and things moved around, can we keep people coming downtown? Before I make that decision, yes, it sounds lovely, get in and out, but I also don't want to do it at the cost of people being able to operate.
All right, so it sounds like money, timeline, and infrastructure detail. That good for for just kind of the general project at the highest level? Okay. Yeah, Mike.
First off, I'd like to agree with Mitch on this, that this is, the above-ground stuff, yeah, that's a little fungible at this point, but the below-ground, that's just replacing pipes. I mean, these companies that we would, whoever we end up contracting out to, they've run a pipe before. Granted, it's, the construction costs of actually ripping everything up and the disruptions and all the ancillary stuff obviously is going to be a lot more complicated in a downtown setting versus, for instance, out on Winchester Street, or Marlborough Street rather, or Winchester Street for that matter. But the below ground is really the part where this has been done before by us, even in the city before, in different places we've done this. We've replaced underground infrastructure. So I think for that side, we should be able to at least get an underground estimate that's within a scale. Obviously, we're not expecting down to the penny. We know that's not going to happen. We don't expect down to the 10,000 or maybe even 100,000, but give us a millions range would be awesome for underground. The challenge, I think, with the simplification that you said where it's money, details, and timeline is we know that there is a relationship between two of those things, and that is money and time. Anyone that's ever done a major building project knows that the faster you want it done, generally, the more you're going to pay for it, because it's more people on the crew to get it done quicker, it's more parallel paths happening, and you're paying for coordination, you're paying for additional manpower for that. So understanding that there will be a relationship between those things. If we want this done in 2 years, which, believe me, we all want it done quicker, we all want it done cheaper. Getting to that point, though, do understand the complexity, but love to see if we can find out what that relationship, at least for the 3 to 2, might look like.
Sounds good. Thanks for that feedback. I think that gives the staff a lot to work on for us. The next item is the Gilbo Ave traffic flow. This is something we talked about a little bit with the steering committee. I don't feel like they really reached any kind of resolution on a preferred option for this, so have at it. Anybody want to jump in on that? Yep.
Sure, thank you. I'm a little concerned about going to one-way, not necessarily for traffic flow now, but for what it likely will be in 15 to 20 years if we do end up developing Gilbo Ave. So if we're increasing the demand to be there, does it make sense to hinder the traffic flow and the ability to get to parking and all that would come with going to one-way? So I guess I would just be interested in what the grander scope of going to one-way would actually be.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm not a big fan of going to one-way on Gilbo. We're not including Emerald Street in this project, and thinking of what the impact to Emerald Street would be of pushing more traffic off of Gilbo that's coming to Main Street. Emerald Street's not within the scope, and I think you're really gonna push a lot of traffic down there. And I don't think we've done a lot of analysis on what that corner would really look like if you pushed all the Gilbo Ave traffic down. I do really like the raised sidewalk concept of at that intersection. I don't know if that fits into this one or the next topic, but at that Gilbo Ave intersection, I think that's nice to have that tabletop to really allow for safe passage across for the bike lane. Yeah, so I think that's my summary on the Gilbo piece.
Two-way traffic, leave it the way it is. We'll clean it up once it's dug up, but one-way is just not gonna work, guarantee it.
It's good. Yep.
Also in favor of two-way traffic. If we were going to one-way, I feel like it would have to be Main Street heading out. You couldn't have Gilbo Ave going the other way, just pouring onto Main Street. There's too much traffic coming down Main Street using that intersection every single day. And the only logical place that the city owns is that Gilbo parking lot. If we're gonna do a parking structure and you're gonna have so much coming and going there, I think changing it would be a disadvantage.
Anyone want to fight for the one-way parking? Yeah, go ahead, Bobby.
No, actually, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other with respect to, well, I don't have strong feelings on the parking direction. I would like to reiterate what Councilor Remy said, is that I do like the tabletop crosswalk idea. I think that's a great way to make pedestrians more visible to cars, also to slow cars down. That's pretty important. I'm very much not in favor of a parking garage. I think we have a lot of parking in Keene. Not all of it is as close in as we'd like. Maybe one thing we could look at is a parking shuttle, especially during the time when the area is going to be shut down. I think we could probably run a parking shuttle to the many parking spaces that are available at a lower cost than it would cost to finance a parking garage. So.
Okay, yep, Randy?
In terms of the above ground, obviously, there's going to be a lot more conversation about that, as we know. But we've talked about Gilboa Ave here, we kind of all agreed. We talk about the raised crosswalks, I don't hear any argument really, I think that's a good idea it's traffic calming also. We saw that on Winchester Street down near the college. It's traffic calming. And a lot of the complaints downtown is traffic goes fast, and it does. And I think where we have crosswalks, wherever we decide they're going to be, if there's going to be more, there's going to be less, whatever, I think the raised crosswalks is a great way for calming traffic. So what I'm kind of saying is I think it'd behoove us to find out what we agree on, because there's going to be things that we're just going to do knock down, drag out, and we know it, okay? There's going to be things that we're going to have trouble getting a majority to even agree on. So I at least like where we've come, we've done a couple of things. Looked at Gilboa Ave, said, you know what, keep it two-way. We looked at the raised crosswalks, it's like that's going to work. So I think if we can find the common ground early and then, get into the weeds later with the things that we are probably going to battle a little bit more, and I think it's a good idea. But if we can find the common ground for the above ground, and I agree with the underground, I mean, time and money. I mean, we're all agreeing on that. What's the time structure? What's the money? How is it going to inconvenience the downtown businesses? So we all agree there, too. So I think it's really good tonight to at least find the common ground. And the things we're not going to agree on, we'll battle that down the road because we'll have to. But let's try to get as much forward as we can that a majority of us agree on. And here's a couple of cases where I think we're moving forward pretty well.
Thank you. So in that vein, everybody agree with keeping the two-way traffic on Gilboa with the raised sidewalk? Okay. Yep.
Just sort of clarifying on that statement, the raised sidewalk, there's a visual of it where it also includes the streets of Gilboa and going across on the streets. I don't know about raising the streets. I'm aligned to raising the sidewalk and the cross, but one of the visuals really raises to sidewalk height Gilboa Ave. And I'm not totally sold on that idea of raising Gilboa Ave itself to sidewalk height and raising Railroad Street to sidewalk height. But raising or crosswalk across, I think is what I'm aligned to. Just one of the visuals raises the whole intersection.
What I'm thinking of is the wide sidewalk that connects Railroad and Gilboa across Main Street that's raised as like a platform.
I just don't know that I'm totally, and that's where I'm stepping back a little bit from my prior statement. I'm not sure that I'm aligned to raising the street level.
Right.
I would say that's a detail that can be worked out in the design, though. All right. Yes, Kat.
I think, isn't there a difference between a raised tabletop, raised tabletop crosswalk versus just a raised speed bump like what on Winchester Street? Those are raised speed bumps. Community Way, those are raised speed bumps. A raised tabletop is much wider and extends all the way out. All right.
Okay, I saw Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The consultants, they did what we told them to do. They showed us, basically the Main Street Central Square area. And I know the subject now is Gilboa Avenue, and I'm getting there. Gilboa Avenue is one of the western expansions out of that area. And I think what we need to see is the bigger picture, going from Pat Russell Park all the way over to Island Street, and see, because that all affects downtown. And there's a lot of development going on both ends of that. That could fit in. And maybe there is a reason why, depending on what's going down west of Keene, west of downtown, maybe there is a reason to make Gilbo one-way. We don't know that until we know where it's going. There was talk about possibly making it look like Church Street up in Burlington, which would be a natural attraction to Keene, something like that. And if we were gonna do that, then you would want it one way, just so they can do deliveries and so on. And you're right, most of the traffic would then go down to Emerald Street, but that would have to be part of the plan. I remember a number of years ago when we were building the new fire station and the courthouse across the street, and we put a temporary plan in for the streets over there to be one-way, Summer Street and Winter Street, and I believe Middle Street and the other streets over there. And the community was outraged. They didn't want it. But we knew we had to do it to get that construction done. We did it for a 90-day period. After we made it one way, the community wanted it to stay that way, and that's why it's still that way today. Sometimes you never know what you have until you try it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Your Honor. After looking at the proposals, I went online and voted like a lot of people on this, and I voted for the one-way. And the rationale was because, again, the development of Gilboa Avenue, whether it be an arts corridor or something like that, the expansion of allowing the farmers market to have a more permanent structure there and giving them actual room to operate. That said, I take Councilor Lake's comment seriously, that is kind of a present state. And we got the numbers for traffic flow on Gilboa Ave, and there are not many cars coming off Gilboa onto Main Street. Like, it's one of the least used turns in all of downtown. And so it would have made sense if there was to be a one-way. That would have made a lot of sense. The more I think about it, though, future state, boy, it's a lot easier to turn a two-way into a one-way down the road than it is to do the reverse, digging up curbs and all that. So, yeah, I think I've changed my mind on this one. I really was on the one-way, but I think I'm good with the two-way. We'll obviously have to figure out some reconfiguration for what the farmer's market side of that will end up looking like, but it's an extraordinarily wide road right now.
Okay. Two-way, raised sidewalk, at least across Main Street, and looking at that tabletop idea, right? Yep.
Sorry. Is that tabletop connecting the rail trail, or is it connecting Gilboa itself? Oh, thank you. Hey, tabletop. Okay, so the rail trail is there on one end of the tabletop, and Gilboa's kind of on the, so it actually encompasses both. The answer is yes.
Yep.
The light is on. Hearing the Councilor's question, I think we need more explanation. I don't understand the Gilboa Railroad Street tabletop or whatever it is. We just need another presentation, so don't put that down as a done.
None of this is a vote. This is just
I
kind
understand,
of,
there's no voting,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to absorb comments also. I'm hearing raised crosswalks are a good thing, but this connection between Gilboa and Railroad Street is confusion.
okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Anyone else on the Gilboa Ave area? All right, let's move on to Main Street. So this is really, could have to do with parking along Main Street, or the bike lanes seem to be a big point of conversation. So anyone want to weigh in on that? Yes, Bobby.
Just that I think bike lanes are hugely important. I get around a lot by bike, but it's not particularly safe. I don't feel safe riding down Main Street. I don't feel safe having my kid ride down Main Street. There aren't a lot of good alternatives to Main Street, especially on the east side. We have the widest Main Street in the east, or whatever that stat is. With a Main Street that wide, there ought to be some space for some bike lanes, protected bike lanes.
Anybody else? Yep.
So I brought this up at one of the workshops, and I'm still waiting to hear the information on it. But what I noticed, looking at the cross-section of Main Street, was, the engineers were saying, oh, look, we're widening the sidewalks from, and I don't have the exact numbers, but let's say from 12 feet to 18 feet, but they were actually then taking back approximately 9 feet for bike lanes, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but what I want to understand is currently we have a sidewalk cafe ordinance, and I know that it's been conversations about how that ordinance might evolve in the future and what we want to see with sidewalk cafes. And I think this is an opportunity for us to really put some thoughtful planning into how they will be integrated into this new downtown of ours. One of the things that our downtown has become known for is entertainment and dining. I mean, that's what we go downtown for the most part nowadays. I also think we have a very short window of time where we get to be outside here in New England, and when we have nice weather, we want to be out there. So I've never had a single person in any of my time at the PLD committee come and complain that we have too many sidewalk cafes. If we alter this sidewalk plan, are we going to be precluding businesses that currently have sidewalk cafe licenses from being able to continue having them? And will we be able to make arrangements for businesses that don't currently have the ability to do outdoor dining to possibly have options for that in the future? And I know we can't plan for every business from now in perpetuity, but we certainly know where there's infrastructure for restaurants currently, and I'd like to get some information about that. Also, in the vein of bike lanes, I would like to see them sidewalk height, not street height, and 100% on the inside side of the cars. There was a visual where there was a bike lane coming behind a row of cars, and that to me just screams disaster. So if we can design it so that they're safe for people to use, that would be great.
I also share your sentiments closely. I was not satisfied. I'm for bike lanes, protected bike lanes, but all of the designs I saw presented in the previous workshops, I'm not satisfied with. I think we could do better, much better, and I expect that we do.
Okay, I saw Tom.
So I think of Main Street as the road, first of all. I think that's our first, because we're gonna dig it up for pipes, we're gonna deal with it. There are a number of small items that need to be taken care of down there, which will all just be taken care of as you put it back together, taking into the consideration the size of cars and pickup trucks and things of that nature today. The other part of Main Street are the crosswalks. And we have a lot of discussions about crosswalks, that they're not safe, they are safe, they're not light, they are lit. And it's really not the crosswalks, it's the drivers that are the issues. One of the ideas that's been thrown out, limit the number of crosswalks. I don't think that'll work. I think we need to stick with the same number of crosswalks, because we want to get people from one side to the other, want to get them to doing all the activities we want them to do downtown. But another area that we can improve just through the fact that we're building them under new conditions and better, so we shouldn't change that. The roadway beyond, up above the square, or above the flagpole, is another discussion. But once again, we're talking about this in pieces, so we'll fix the roads, which means we're gonna have to fix the sidewalks. And that'll get into the discussion about bike paths and things of that nature. But please remember, there's only so many feet. What is it, 162 feet to carve up? So if we start talking about bike paths and more sidewalk cafes, which I like, not in December, something's gotta give. And it's either gonna be parking or travel lanes. Thanks.
Thank you. Randy?
As far as Main Street or even up here, I think one thing we have to really look at is no parking loss. And I think we heard from 40 to 50 downtown merchants of the concern about parking. So whatever final design we have, I think it's imperative that we don't lose any more parking. If you look over the years, and some of us that have been on council longer than others, the Railroad Street property, for example, it was a big dirt lot. It was actually free parking for years. We developed that. That parking went away. We developed the fire station. That's basically, most of that is parking for, firefighters and for employees. A lot of that parking went away. When we built the apartment project on Roxbury Street, well, there's 300 to 400 apartments in there. I forget, or a couple hundred anyhow. But each apartment has a space for 1.5 cars. Well, most places have 2 cars. Those cars now park along Spring Street, Brook Street. That took up a lot of extra parking that, is now gone. Gilboa Ave, where the skate park was, we know there's a potential commercial project that's going to go there. It's going to take up more parking. When the Colonial Theater has a show at least once a week, that's 900 people coming in. A lot of them are coming into town. They need the parking. So I'm not arguing for or against any particular item here, but what I'm saying is whatever we do, we cannot have a net loss of parking. We actually need to be looking at additional parking, because no matter what we think, people are going to drive to Keene. People aren't riding a bike from Winchendon, Mass. To come to a show at the Colonial Theater. They're coming in with a car and they're going to park downtown. So whatever we do, whatever final plan we come up with, and there's going to be other options coming up, we cannot lose parking. We just simply can't afford it. We talk about a parking deck. We've been talking about a parking deck. Mitch and I have been here for over 20 years. So has Phil. We've been talking parking decks for 20 years. If it happens, it's not going to be anytime soon anyhow. So whatever we do, no loss of net parking. Our businesses downtown simply can't afford it.
All right, thanks. Phil?
Thank you. We're still on bike lanes? Yeah. Oh, okay. Many cities have tried those bike lanes. There was a developer named John Filippelli who was a planner who specialized in bike lane planning. And they put that in many cities, and they found, and for safety reasons, they were taken back out. And I don't think we want to make that same mistake. When we had the hearing over at the auditorium in the high school, there was a constituent, and I thought she had a great idea. She said, put the bike lanes 1 block east and 1 block west. Let the bikes go down there instead of going down Main Street. And I thought that was a great idea. And looking at the bike lanes in other communities, you don't have to go any further than Brattleboro, Vermont. You go down Putney Road in Brattleboro, Vermont, where they have a bike lane. I've never seen anyone there with a bike, but I've seen motorcycles passing up traffic on that bike lane. I'm afraid it's going to be abused for other reasons. And the other part of it is, it's pretty when it goes down. It's a nice, pretty green, but it gets worn after a while. It gets sun bleached. It gets sand gritted. It gets worn down from traffic. I mean, just look at all our crosswalks in the town right now. Because of the harsh winter, they're almost all faded, and that's what it's going to look like. I think it's going to be a little bit ugly looking after a couple of years, and it's going to cost too much money to maintain it and keep it green all the time. So I think it's a good idea to move it to a less traffic area and keep the safety on Main Street. Thank you.
Mike Giacomo?
Thank you, Honor. Yeah, I think we've been having these meetings talking about downtown infrastructure design ideas for, 5-6 years now. I believe we've been doing this back in 2017. I remember having these, and I think I actually talked with Councilor Greenwald after one of them about shifting the bike lanes off a block, having them go down a different block. I think there might be room for some hybrid models here for a compromise with the sidewalks. I don't think a protected bike lane, we're protecting the bicyclists from cars, and we're protecting pedestrians from bicyclists. And I guess that's the whole idea of it. But I wonder if, I agree that we're taking up too much space of that total 160-something number that Court knows. And so what it's resulting in is not only are we squishing the bike lanes, we're squishing the sidewalks, but we're also squishing the parking. And it has a weird effect, because if you look at the designs, it's still all angled parking all the way down. If you look more carefully, though, that parking is angled a lot steeper. And the reason for that, or sorry, steeper this way, more perpendicular with traffic flow. And the reason they do that is they can gain a couple extra parking spots in each of those sections by changing the angle of the parking. Seems okay in premise because we're gaining parking that way. However, what that means now is if you've ever tried to turn out of one of the angled parkings on Main Street, you can pull basically straight out pretty easily inside the lane. The lanes in that design are only 11 feet wide. That is a narrow lane compared to what we have today, and you're pulling out almost closer to perpendicular out with your car. So you're going to be blocking off essentially 2 lanes of traffic every single time you back out of one of those parking spaces with the current plan with the full bike lane on both sides and all that. So I think a hybrid is probably possible where we have the bike lanes at sidewalk level, for sure. But instead of having this whole massive dedicated lane, put those little hard bumps down the edge of the bike lane so it's crossable by pedestrians, but the bikes have a dedicated area. The pedestrians know when they're crossing into a bike lane, but it can still be occupied basically up to that. If there is some kind of an event, if there's a sidewalk cafe, we can be aware that there's a bike lane there, but we're not actually fully cordoning off an area for bicyclists. I think it's important to keep bicyclists up and down Main Street. It is the main thoroughfare north-south in the downtown. And it's fun to ride, but it's also terrifying right now. And I'd love to at least move everything in front of the cars. I think there's some room for compromise here on this one.
Has anybody ever gone down to Cambridge by Harvard? They have bike lanes there. Well, very few bikers use the bike lanes because they're afraid of the cars, someone open the door or something. And they have a right to use the road just like any other vehicle. So how are you going to ensure that people, even though there's a bike lane, are not going to use the regular, lane and back up traffic like they do in Cambridge in other big places like that? And what's one of the problems that they have in high traffic areas? And we say it right now, if you're a bicyclist, you have to stop at a red light, but I don't have to stop at a red light in the bike lane. I can stop at a red light right in the middle of the lane, and in summertime comes again this year, I can guarantee you are going to see cyclists in the middle of the lane right out here getting ready to come into the roundabout. So that is, like some of the things Councilor Jones was saying, those are some of the other things that people have to take into effect. It could be really frustrating if you're stuck behind a cyclist when there's a bike lane there, but that cyclist feels safer going up the middle of the traffic lane.
So is it fair to say that the consensus is for the staff to take another stab at doing bike lanes on Main Street, keeping in mind safety and reducing the amount of space that they would take up along Main Street? Bobby?
Yeah, just to say, there's good ways to do bike lanes and bad ways to do bike lanes. Councilor Jones was complaining about bike lanes that are just painted green. I don't like those bike lanes either. Those aren't safe. Paint does not protect a car from going into a bicycle lane. It's really, that kind of thing is just about almost the least you can do. The other thing you could do that's even less, which is what we do now, is just paint a picture of a bicycle with an arrow on the street and say, oh, there you go. That's really, I don't think that's particularly safe. I think that's doing a very limited amount of what needs to be done to make bicycling safe. If you don't see bikers using bike lanes, it's because the bikes aren't safe. But if the lanes are separated from traffic, then suddenly a whole lot of people can use it. Kids can use it. People who would be afraid of riding in traffic can use it. So a lot depends on how well the bike lane is implemented.
Okay, Randy?
Following up what Councilor Jones said, I agree. I think we should really look at behind the buildings on both sides of Main Street. When you look at this, Keene's very bike-friendly. Look, all of us, when we've been voting, we always vote positive on bikes in Keene. We've never had a problem. The rail trails, we're very bike-friendly. But let's be honest here, we're talking 2 city blocks. How much are we gonna invest in move things around and reduce parking and reduce sidewalk space over 2 city blocks? Anybody that comes into Keene on a bicycle, if they're pedaling up or if they're pedaling down, they'd have a couple of options, either ride with the traffic, or you can actually get off your bike and walk 2 blocks, because that's what we're talking, 2 blocks, or pedal around the buildings. And we're talking about something that for 4 months a year is virtually not used at all anyhow. So how much do we spend that's going to be used minimally anyhow for 7 to 8 months a year? Okay? We can still be very bike-friendly. We are very bike-friendly. We just say, once you hit Emerald Street or once you hit Central Square, you just loop around the buildings and then come back onto Main Street. I think it's a fairly simple process. We're not being anti-bike. I don't want to hear any of that out there. We're a very bike-friendly city council. I just think we're talking 2 city blocks, and we can, and I've pedaled too, and I don't like pedaling down these 2 city blocks, so I simply go to the east side or the west side and go around it. Pretty simple, cost-effective solution.
All right, Mike?
Thank you. I'm gonna go quick. I'm aligned with the idea of no parking loss, parking gain. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on whether there are bike lanes, but if there are bike lanes, I think they should be, they need to be sidewalk height, because if we change our mind and they're not used, we can make them go away and we have more sidewalk. I want to make sure that there's room for cars to pass for deliveries. That's something that happens all the time, right in front of Miranda's. There's a UPS driver that'll pull over right there and block the right lane of traffic. And if you can't get around them, we need to make sure there's room there. And the only other one is that Church Street crosswalk northbound. We need to do something different with that, because I don't care how slow you're going. If somebody's trying to cross there and there's a car parked there, they're going to surprise you every single time. The way that intersection's set up, you can't see the pedestrians coming into the street. So that specifically northbound Church Street crosswalk is a little. So I don't think anything changes in the current design, which is why I'd like to
All
see
right.
something there.
So looking at time, and I want to get to the meaty conversation around Central Square, how do you all feel about them taking another look at bike lanes on Main Street, and then also an option for what does it look like? Is it possible to divert things back behind the buildings on Main Street, and then maybe taking a look at that? Yep.
I would also like them to consider, I know we don't want to lose parking on Main Street, and we've heard a lot about pedestrian, but cyclists, and as well as being a walkable city. We also know we have an aging community. Folks in New Hampshire are getting older and older. We have one of the oldest populations in the country. With that being said, I would like more consideration put forth for Main Street for more handicapped parking. That would then force people who are able-bodied, who can walk longer distances, to park at those further lots off of Main Street and give parking to people who need it the most right in front of the stores. We have very few handicapped spots. Having worked in the social service arena, I know that state law will allow people with handicapped placards to park in any spot free of charge, but that is not known by everybody. So I would like consideration for more handicap parking on Main Street.
Okay. Yep.
Final thought on this regarding parking. I like to bike around the perimeter. Bicycles are basically going to go wherever they want to go. And on my recent journey, I rode a bicycle in Florida, and I'll tell you, they were on the sidewalk, they were in the street, they were in the bike lanes, they were everywhere. Just a fact. They're going to do whatever, and it's fine. I'm concerned about the loss of parking, and it's been said, the plan that is my light on? Yeah. The plan that was floated out of ad hoc loses 14 spaces, and I question that. I count more than 35 if you remove the parking out of the center. So what I'm going to ask for is a timeline for the garage. Where is it going? When is it going? And where are we getting the money for it? So before we are giving up any parking spaces, I want to hear about the parking deck.
Okay,
Thanks, good.
yep.
35 pounds ago, I used to bike 7 miles a day, every morning. And if it rained, I walked with an umbrella. I'm an avid bicyclist. I would go up Surrey Mountain and come down the other side of it alone. And I had some serious accidents in the wild by myself, and I went over the handlebars on Main Street, hitting a curb because a car got too close to me. Even having said that, I mean, my life got really, really busy. Instead of winding down in my 60s, I'm winding up. And I haven't had time to do the kind of exercise I want to do. And I sit and I plot my day of what I got to do and where I got to hit. And I'll go by Prime Roast, and if there's an opening, I'll stop and get coffee. If there's no opening, I just keep moving. I might go to Brewbaker's. If they don't have an opening, I'm not going to risk getting a ticket or towed in Mitch's lot, so I don't get it there. It sounds
Ticket.
like really simple and small potatoes, but imagine all those different cups of coffee. Of people like me, it's like, I don't have time to F around with parking. But on the other hand, it's like, we're talking about a parking garage in Gilboa Ave, and moving parking away from Main Street and prioritizing pedestrians and bicyclists. Like, there's got to be room for everybody. And it can't be like we're going to favor and make this all for pedestrians and bicyclists, and anybody who drives a vehicle has got to go over here. I mean, maybe bikes go over there too. I'm in favor of going around the city, and it's like, for me, you know, a car can't go everywhere, a bicycle can't go everywhere, a person on foot can't go everywhere. Sometimes you got to park somewhere and walk, and it should be the same for bikes. And we have so many trails, and we've put so much money into building huge $1 million bridges that go over highways for protection, and we're adding trails all the time. So I don't want to hear that we are not pro pedestrian or pro bicyclist. I mean, we do a tremendous amount of work to enhance that. If somebody's got to get off their bike and walk for 4 blocks, I don't have a problem with that. I do that now because I didn't feel safe going down Main Street. Do I think we should put extra millions of dollars into that to accommodate like 4 blocks of biking? No, I don't think we should. So I'm in favor of supporting bicyclists, but I like the idea that Mitch and Phil mentioned about going around on the outside of it. There's got to be a give and take here. It can't all be focused on cars. It can't be focused on just bikes. It's got to be a give and take.
Okay, yeah, Bobby.
Well, you know, just to say give and take, I think very little has actually been given to bikes, and a lot has been given to cars. And I think it's appropriate we balance that out, especially, you know, as we're getting into e-bikes and smaller electric vehicles that can also make use of this infrastructure. I don't think we're as bike-friendly a town as people say. You know, I've been run off the road in this town, so there's a vibe here that is not as bicycle-friendly as we think. We do build trails, but we're building recreational trails. We're not thinking of it as a transportation system, which is what we need to do, because if it's a transportation system, you know, people can use that to get to work and they won't need parking spaces. Everybody who takes a bike into town is one less parking space that we need to fill. So we could even lose parking, but if we expanded the amount of bike lanes and made it easier for people to get down, it would actually be easier to park.
All right, so we're gonna move on to a different topic, but we're gonna, to summarize, we're gonna look at reduced space, bike lane idea for Main Street, and then emphasis on what are the options for, or what does it look like to direct bikes out around Main Street, behind the buildings? What does that look like? Yep.
I'm sorry, I just feel like I have to make one more comment, and support Counselor Williams a little bit here, because although I'm not an avid bicyclist and I'm not 100% pro these bike lanes, in the way we use Main Street today, I have been commuting a lot downtown. I've been helping a client get around, and I've noticed an exorbitant amount of these scooters that are electric, and there are a lot of people that are using them for transportation now. I remember when the little two-wheelie things came out and everybody was gonna be riding segways, and that never happened. But this is actually something that is happening, and I'm seeing it, and it's growing, and we do need to take it into consideration. Another option is bike lanes on one side of Main Street. Maybe it's not on both sides. Like, what are some compromises that you can come up with to get, as a win-win?
Thanks, that's helpful. All right, we're gonna move on to the Central Square area. you can talk about each of these individually if you want, or you can just make comments on the whole thing, the mini roundabout and the expanded space, recreational space around Central Square. So who wants to dive into that one? Go ahead.
I'll take the first stab at it, Tom. I'll keep this pretty brief. I do like the general plan that was put forth by Stantec. I think it's really interesting. The question I keep coming back to, though, is it better than what we have now, or better than what we could do with some minor adjustments? Right? I think there may be some other ways to change the Central Square traffic flow to accommodate some of the concerns we have around the length of the crosswalks, the traffic flow itself. Could we just move to yellow flashing lights that can turn red for emergency vehicles and pedestrians to cross? That's an option, but like I said, I do like the proposal. I keep coming back. Is it better than what we have now?
There's a place for roundabouts, and from my experiences, Central Square is not the place. Traffic signals that are out there are 83 years old, no, 34 years old. It's old technology, and the road that's around it hasn't been improved to catch up with the technology of the traffic lights. So there are improvements that can be made, and it'll make it smooth, it'll be good for drivers and walkers and our uses downtown if we just improve that when we're digging it up for the water and sewer underneath. So I say, no roundabout, not necessary, stick with the improved traffic system that's engineered for the number of cars and trucks and bicyclists of the current years. Thank you.
Thank you. My question I keep going back to is, are we expanding it to include more meeting space and gathering space? And if we're doing that, are we abandoning the idea of an arts and culture corridor on Gilboa Ave? Are we abandoning Pat Russell Park as being a meeting place and gathering place? We have a lot of different irons in the fire for meeting spaces and event space. And I question whether or not Central Square is really the best place for those events. I understand event organizers love it because it is high visibility. However, if we are going down the path of trying to build up Gilboa to be that arts and culture corridor, are we shooting ourselves in the foot and going down diverging paths? Like, we need to pick a path and see it through.
Randy?
Thank you. A couple of things, as I allude back to, I don't want to see any net loss of parking. And also, I don't want to have 5 or 6 or 10 parking spaces eliminated and say, we made up for them a quarter mile down the road. Well, we know how it is if people are going to restaurants, they're going out, they're not going to park a quarter mile down the road. It's just fact. Council Workman made a good point. As far as green space goes, that's what we're looking at Gilboa Ave for. And we just did Carpenter Field, and we invested a lot of money there. And I've heard a couple of comments about, oh, look at Church Street up in Burlington. Well, first of all, Church Street in Burlington is not Main Street Burlington, it's Church Street Burlington. Very similar to Gilboa Ave. You know, I envision down the road, I mean, Gilboa Ave attaching Main Street all the way down to the Colony Mill. At some point, that's going to be developed. We know we're talking a parking deck there at some point, maybe not in my lifetime, but someday. And I really picture as Gilboa Ave being an extension of Main Street, you know, going all the way down, running parallel with West Street. So that's something that we really need to consider. And as a member that was on the ad hoc committee, one thing that wasn't looked at enough or even at all, when we talk about lights downtown, well, two things. We talk about traffic downtown going too fast. Well, lights slow traffic down. Look, none of us like stopping for a red light, I get that. But in a downtown area, it slows the traffic down. And also, as we know, we have a fire department coming through, and it also freezes everything momentarily so the truck can get through. And as Council Powers just alluded to, the lights that we have downtown now, people complain about it, well, it's because they're antiquated. You know, I mean, basically, they go back, you know, what, 40 years or so, or longer. And one of the problems is now if somebody hits a walk light just to say to cross Roxbury Street, all of downtown shuts down. Or if they're just going to cross West Street. Basically, a new modern computerized lighting system, you know, when we get to that point, will alleviate a lot of that. You want to cross Roxbury Street and there's no other traffic coming, you'll get the walk light to cross there and traffic will keep flowing. So I think it's an issue that hasn't been looked at virtually at all. I think the traffic pattern downtown works. It can be improved, and that's one of the things we're talking about here. We can definitely improve the lighting system, the traffic lights downtown immensely. And I think a new modernized, you know, computer system would do that. And I think, you know, I'm not saying keep it exactly how it is, but we don't need to change the whole course of it. We just need a more modern system.
Thank you. Just to address, there's a couple comments around the, like, using that space for events and that event organizers should look to move to Gilboa. Gilboa has no soul. So Gilboa goes from, you've got Lindy's and then it goes parking lots until you hit the center of Keene. It's not, there's no soul to that street. That's why people don't want to do events there. Until that's changed, which is some number of years, and even if you build a parking deck, it's still just parking. So there's nothing there. And people talk about, you know, hey, Church Street in Burlington and people do stuff there. It's surrounded by businesses on both sides. That's what makes it fun, right? It's not that you're walking through parking lots. So that's what's nice about Main Street is you get surrounded by the commerce and you get to see the businesses and you get to interact with them without dealing with cars. Not suggesting closing it down, but that's why those are different. And that's why I can say as somebody who organizes large events, we will continue to push for those to be on Main Street and in Central Square as long as we possibly can. As far as the Central Square design itself, I don't have a strong opinion on whether it's a roundabout or the current design and some modification of that. I will say the current traffic pattern does not work, and I think that it's not just lights. There is a function of it that's the lights. But if you're coming up to the intersection to go down Main Street or across to Roxbury Street, there are 4 arrows on that thing, or maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, but there's some number of arrows on that all point in different directions and say, can't turn except on red arrow, but there's a red arrow all the time. And sometimes it goes, anyway. So it's a very confusing intersection if you're not from here. I've heard feedback, drive it a couple times and you'll figure it out. That's not how intersections are supposed to work. You're supposed to know how to drive it when you drive it. We have a lot of people that come in from out of town. You're supposed to know how to drive the intersections when you get into them. It's not a lessons learned kind of thing. The number of people I see get stuck in the middle because they tried to cross against the red light, it happens every day. So something's got to change with the design. It doesn't need to be a roundabout, but that design doesn't work. I'm completely aligned to not losing parking. So that said, like, even if we go to the idea of building the mini roundabout, I like the idea of putting a parking lot at the top of Central Square instead and having it reverse direction. So you're going counter to the direction you're coming today, and you're building a little mini parking lot there, and it's easy to shut down if somebody wants to do a smaller event. You can put some bollards up, and you could have a smaller event there. I'll say the big events don't fit in that space, so they're still going to close Central Square if they do the events down here. But if somebody wants to do a smaller event, they could potentially close that little parking lot. That said, I'm not sold on the mini roundabout either. I think that the smaller roundabout, I don't want to call it a mini roundabout, the smaller roundabout, I'm not concerned about the form and flow. I think it would work. But I understand the concerns that the businesses have, and I can understand the concerns of not having the same flow around Main Street or the ability to cycle traffic, so, yeah, that's kind of my feedback.
Thank you. I'm gonna try to jump on both because I have Councilor Howard and John here is right here. Me as a driver, or someone who's helping get me there, right what he said, you come around that circle and. Turn on her mic, please. Oh, sorry. Here it comes, I'm so loud anyhow. Here it comes from Roxbury, and they're not gonna let me in to get around so I can come over here. But I think it ought to stay 2-lane, I think, and just fix what you were saying. I think that really works the best. Just get some new lights in there, figure it out. There's just some kind of engineering that's not quite right, but I do like I sure like being able to come around and, oh, good, I can go right over to City Hall.
Sounds like some consensus to investigate and
It's a bad
better
corner.
understand what the lighting improvements would do. Right? Okay, we're gonna go up the line, Mike, Bobby, and then I'll go up this line.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are some incredibly complex calculations that highway engineers have done, and have presented us with, that show what the traffic queues look like with a modern lighting system. You are still talking about traffic queues, multiple blocks up Main Street, heading northbound. Besides for that, roundabouts are traffic calming measures. Lights are traffic accelerating measures because people speed up to catch red lights. It literally just happened today, and I saw a pedestrian almost clipped in Central Square trying to cross because they knew the crosswalk was coming. Someone raced to catch a red, ran the red, and almost clipped a pedestrian. That's what people do at traffic signals. So not only does the math not make sense, and again, these are traffic engineers. These are people that do this for a living. We are people that live it. Sure, we see it and say, oh yeah, that could be improved. Great. There's actual math that is done by people who do this professionally and study traffic flow patterns, and they have said, hey, this is what a modern light will do. This is what your current light backed up to Eagle Court. So yeah, it's an improvement over current lighting system. But then you have roundabout, which is a continuous flow system. It is a continuous flow system. You have a cadence, cars come in and out and they move around, and there's no reason to race into a roundabout because you won't get there any faster. You're hitting a roundabout, and then you will slow down and move through it. You have to. So this is shown by study after study after study, by the experts in this field. I understand we all have feelings about this.
Really?
But feelings really should pale in comparison to actual science and data, which is available out there for studies that are done. Granted, we have a nightmarishly unique intersection here. And I do appreciate that there's going to be some nuance, but there have been, there have been calculations done on this. It has been presented to us. So I feel like I learned how to drive a car literally on this intersection right here in front of us. I think a lot of us might have. And there's certainly an amount of nostalgia for what we have out there, but I feel that expanding the square, what we would accomplish here is we would utilize a really criminally underutilized space. We all agree that this is an amazing asset to our city. This is a landmark. It's a feature that we all absolutely love and do not want to see destroyed in any way. But yet we can't use it without crossing a 70-foot crosswalk to get over there. So what's the point of having these amazing gathering places that you can't get to easily? It's not used unless you're protesting or unless the road is shut down already or unless you're smoking something you shouldn't be in the gazebo. It's not being used. So let's connect it. Let's make it part of the pedestrian corridor and actually make it an attraction that people want to spend time in. I think people want to spend time. They just can't get there.
Wholeheartedly disagree.
Just saying, I think our current downtown traffic pattern is particularly bad. It combines the worst aspects of a traffic circle and traffic light. We could pick one or the other, and it would be a lot better. I think when we have both, it's trouble. You know, that the light we have now there's a line of cars that are back down Main Street. We talk about wanting to have downtown cafes, right? Well, the downtown cafes aren't really very nice if you're sitting there inhaling exhaust. So we got to get the cars not backed up. We got to get them out of there so they're not, so we don't have to breathe that stuff. I understand people are pretty nervous about the traffic circle. Personally, I think it'll work very well. As Mike said, we have professionals studying this. But I think that needs to be demonstrated to people so people are comfortable with it. I would like to see a model, like computer model of, okay, this is what the cars look like going in and out. I think that would help perhaps ease people's minds. But I'd also like to know, okay, so say we build this traffic circle, this mini roundabout, and you're right, it's not good. For whatever reason, people hate it, and we make a decision to get rid of it. What does that cost? What are we looking at the cost of trying it and failing? And if that cost is low enough, then maybe it's worth giving a shot, because I think it'd succeed.
Thank you. Kate?
Thank you. Okay, so this is a lot to unpack. First, I'd like to talk about events downtown. I agree that Gilbo is soulless. I think that I have been harping on the idea of, can we get events pushed on Gilbo? Can we get events pushed on Gilbo? Can we come up with a city template to incentivize event organizers to move their events down there? And it just never happens. No one wants to have events on Gilbo. And I grew up in Keene, and I remember the street fair, and I remember First Night, and being downtown on Main Street is magical, and that's why people want to be there. That's why people move here. You hear lots of stories about that, and that's why people want to have their events there, because it's that backdrop of this gorgeous New England town. We have a lot of poor methods of blocking off our downtown, in my opinion. I think it's really unattractive when we have to close it off, and that this project can solve a lot of issues and sort of make this much more convenient and much more attractive. We could install retractable balusters. We can create a way to segregate off different intersections that we know we're always closing, where we're not bringing in public works vehicles and Jersey barriers and costing event organizers all of this money. Like, let's just create a simple way of making Main Street accessible for these events. Yes, it's an inconvenience to people coming downtown, but I think at the end of the day, they're experiences that we all grow up and think about. And I think that originally I saw that plan for that roundabout, and I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. It's out of the box. It creates this additional green space. It allows us access to the common, all of the wonderful positive ideas behind this. But after really taking into consideration what the historical nature of our downtown is, I'm not in favor of changing it. I have looked at the traffic patterns with the emergency vehicles coming around there. I watched an 18-wheeler come over the Marlborough Street roundabout today and, almost come through the grass in order to accomplish that. I mean, imagine our fire trucks doing that day in and day out to get to emergency services. How quickly is that roundabout going to deteriorate? I was in the intersection of Main Street, and Deluzio's ambulance, who I'm assuming, does not have access to shut down the lights on Main Street, was trying to get through, and no one moved. No one moved, and I started honking my horn to try to get cars in front of me to move so that I could move. It was a complete disaster, and I don't know how long that ambulance sat there waiting. I think that I have multiple times, including today, watched a car coming up Main Street, and this is actually kind of a rare one, coming up Main Street and cut through the bottom of the square to go onto West Street. I've actually, that intersection is so poorly signed. Regularly, every week, I see somebody mistakenly take the red light arrow as a green light and try to cut through onto Roxbury and take several people's lives into their own hands. But that whole situation needs to be corrected in some way, whether we close off that with a way that only emergency vehicles have access through, and we force people to go all the way down and around. I don't know what the exact answer is, but the labeling has to be changed. And when you look at the traffic backups, they do happen at that Main Street south, heading south down toward Church Street. But the reason that they happen there is that it's a 3-lane road coming in, and there's an island that interjects in that right-hand lane. So you have to, what you actually see happen is a row of cars in the center lane coming all the way down Main Street, no one on the Roxbury to Church Street lane, because they can't get in there because the center lane is stopping traffic, and no one in the left turn lane. And I know that because I constantly come up Main Street and take the little cheat around, and there's never one car in there. And no one will get in that lane because they think that the only thing you can do in that lane is go all the way around Main Street. So that just needs to be reorganized. You have an entire lane that's not being used, so you can shift the whole traffic to the left and create 2 lanes of traffic that are being used and that go around the circle in a logical pattern that's signed and lined and understandable. And I took driver's ed in Keene, and I had an entire day where our driver's ed teacher taught us how to go around that circle. And he basically, at the end of the day, was like, there's no law that says you have to be in any lane to do anything. You can kind of do whatever you want. But when you're in there, this is how you're going to survive it. And that was basically like our driver's ed class. So we can start from there and make some improvements, for sure.
Mitch?
Okay, no traffic stories, no driving stories. A couple of things that I picked up in conversation about the running red lights. Something about traffic enforcement. I don't often see any kind of police stops for yellow lights, and I think that should happen. Conversation about traffic delay on Main Street. Really? You know, come on. You know, if you have to sit there through 1 or 2 cycles of the lights, breathe a little. It's okay, really. It just is not worth all the conversation. We do need better signage, absolutely, of what lane goes where, and then with the multiple turning sign thing at Central Square, we can improve the language. Definitely get modern traffic signals. Short-term fixes, just thinking some things. Stop sign at Roxbury Street, stop sign at Washington Street, stop sign at Court Street, because people don't seem to understand yield. And, we actually have a roundabout right there. Somewhere way back when, somebody had a really good idea. Maybe just shape it a little better and sign it better. And ultimately, I think we need to listen to the public. And we've heard very, very loudly that the basic configuration that's out there is historic and wanted. So we need to work with it, shape it, maybe make it work a little better. And I'd like to see some traffic enforcement done.
All right, so it sounds like we need some more time on, I think, understanding how the modern traffic light would improve traffic flow, which everybody agrees traffic flow could be improved out there. So maybe look at that, and that's what I'm hearing from the group. Okay? Yep. Yep.
I just want to make, thank you. I want to make a few points. Accidents do occur in rotaries. We've all seen them. I may not be a professional in traffic development, but I am a professional in human behavior with a master's in psychology. Cars will race into rotaries. They will race to beat emergency vehicles coming into a rotary. They're not going to want to wait. They will not want to wait for pedestrians to cross a rotary. And people do use the common. In fact, for the city concerts on Wednesdays, the common is almost jam-packed with people who bring their lawn chairs. So people have been figuring out ways to safely cross over to the common right now as it is. If we really want to make some adjustments, we can make some very minor adjustments to the pattern right now. As much as Councilor Bosley likes that slip lane cheat turn, I absolutely hate it. I have to be in that lane to go around to get to my home off of West Street. It's infuriating to have to sit there in a line of traffic waiting to take their shortcut at a green light when they could just go all the way around, and they're never going to get through because traffic is coming in to that direction. So on rush hour, that left lane is completely pushed back with people trying to take a shortcut that isn't a shortcut at all. Same thing coming southbound. People taking lefts onto Eagle Court. If we eliminated those left-hand turns and forced traffic to use the rotary at Winchester and Marlboro and the roundabout at Central Square, that in itself is just a continued loop. And I have tracked and done my own studies. It does not take that much longer to go from one roundabout to the other roundabout on Main Street. If we eliminated and did a few short, minor modifications, also with the lighting system, at nighttime, we can have a lighting system that when there is no traffic coming in that direction, the light turns red and allows the other traffic to go. I have many nights been sitting at a red light with green lights in the opposite direction and no cars coming. I could have very easily ran that red light and been safe. I don't, because it's against the law, but you could. So just having a smarter design there with very minor changes would save us a lot of money and a lot of headaches.
In reference to Council Remy about Gilbo Ave being soulless, I agree with that. And way before there was a discussion about Main Street, there was a discussion about Gilbo Ave, and like Councilor Workman, many people, councilors and residents, had the vision to see what it could be. And we have talked about it and then walked away from it. Talked about it, walked away. We even had, when former city manager John McLean was in charge, he had like all these different designs that a class of architects brought forward for us to look at for Gilbo Ave. Stakeholders were at the table, from Keene State to Antioch to, before Keene Ice was what it is, and the city. I mean, there were so many discussions and so many visions. Why we never pursued it, I don't know. But it could have soul. It could have a lot of soul. And everybody that I talk to, almost everybody, when they decide to move to Keene, it's downtown that they fall in love with. That's the soul of the city. And I think that we need to preserve the history. We need to preserve the charm of downtown. And I'm not in favor of a rotary or a eggabout or whatever we want to call it at the top of the square. I just don't think it's a good idea. I don't care what you tell me for traffic study. And I don't see how that's going to be, even though there's going to be shorter crossing distances and less crossing distances. I don't see how having a roundabout there with no lights is going to be safer for pedestrians, and it seems like there's going to be a lot of stop-and-go traffic. And I must have been on the street the same day Councilor Bosley was, because I witnessed Deluzio's not being able to get through, and was furious, because I actually was like one of the few cars that pulled over. And I thought to myself, I got to talk to Elizabeth and see if we can, and the fire department, and see if we can coordinate and somehow hook them into our system, and that we do the same for them to get people safely through that we do for our own. I think that if we make tweaks to the existing downtown, we could enhance it without spending millions of dollars and making major changes that takes away from our soul. And I think that, what was the other thing I was gonna say? Just lost my train of thought. That's another over 60 thing. But no, I do think, oh, I know I was gonna say, that left lane, I have the complete opposite experience than you did, where there were like 8 or 10 cars in front of me, and the light had turned green, one car was waiting, and I must have waited like 2 light cycles before I was able to move. And so, I mean, I would love to see that done away with. And I think we could just clean it up and make it work, and preserve our history, preserve our core, our soul. I think some of these changes aren't necessarily going to give us more soul. So that's my thought.
All right, I think we're gonna, Raleigh, you wanna have the last word on this one? Because I wanna make sure we leave some time.
Yes, Mayor, what a rare privilege that would be. I'm not hearing anyone saying that they like to brick out the top and get rid of the road that's in front of stages. I'm not hearing any support for that. What I haven't seen is what if we made a large roundabout, not just a herky-jerky square that's not, but what if there was a large roundabout around the square? I haven't really seen that yet. I know we've got, 7 or 5 entry points into that? But that's one thing I haven't seen. I like the idea of having a roundabout. They don't always have to be speed roundabouts. But you can have roundabouts with traffic circles. I'd like to see the data. I'm one that likes to see data and likes to see simulations. And we just haven't seen a lot of the data, the ABC grade data on the options of a big roundabout, a small roundabout, or even improved traffic flow. So I'd really like to see that.
Great, I think that's really good feedback, and I don't think we're gonna reach consensus on that item tonight, so I'm sure there'll be some more discussion on that. I wanna thank you all for engaging in that discussion. I think that was super valuable. I hope the staff feels the same way, and we'll be able to bring some information together for you moving forward. Before we get into the public portion of this meeting tonight, I wanna take maybe if you can up the PA system so that people can hear, please, if someone's listening in the back room. Thank you, that works. I'm gonna take a quick break, 5-minute break, I think, for everybody, and we'll come back and then we'll have some public input, okay? So we'll be back at 10 of. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're gonna have give everybody 3 minutes. My associate Bill here is gonna give you a yellow card at 2.5 minutes, and then a red card at 3 minutes, and that's really just to allow the most amount of people possible the ability to speak tonight. And so we're gonna start off with Katie Foltz. And you can speak at either the standing mic or the sitting down ones. It's your prerogative.
Thank you. Thank you, counselors, for this opportunity. As the mayor said, my name is Katie Foltz. I live on Edward Street. I'm part of the Arts Corps Committee. I also work downtown at the Colonial. I'm here to encourage you all to not only think of Main Street as a thoroughfare, but I encourage you to think of it as a destination. For the future of Keene, we need to make plans for safety. We need to plan for a central square that doesn't involve crossing multiple lanes of traffic. And raising the street to curb level on Gilboa, that will make events there more accessible. So the farmer's market, people will be able to roll up onto the curb. It's less of a tripping hazard for everyone. I won't look like an idiot, so that's great. Considerations like this and the bike safety and walkability are what residents have requested, both in the last master plan as well as the beginning planning for this process. Public art, green space, gathering spaces, dining options, walkability, all lead to a vibrant downtown, and that attracts residents to live here. It also attracts us downtown to spend time. It encourages visitors downtown to spend time and money on Main Street. In addition to walkability, bike lanes increase the number of people who can readily access this without increasing the need for parking. Councillor Chadbourne mentioned a number of citywide enhancements that aim to increase the quality of life. This specific project enhances the quality of life while also directly increasing potential spending at local businesses in the downtown core. Downtown Keene is a vibrant downtown, and we are lucky to have a vibrant downtown in this day and age. And we're going to need to take a lot of time to make good plans to maintain such vibrancy. This project allows us to do that, and it will be a bigger lost opportunity cost to not make these changes now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Todd Horner.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Todd Horner. I'm Vice Chair of the City's Bicycle and Pedestrian Pathway Advisory Committee. And you can probably tell where I'm going with my comments. We generally support allocating space in the public sphere for folks on foot and on bike. But based on tonight's conversation, I wanted to focus on a particular piece of the project, which is the protected bike lanes. This is something our committee has talked about quite a bit, and we think it's incredibly important to allocate space for bicyclists on Main Street to travel separated from vehicle traffic. That's when you're going to see a diversity of cyclists actually using our bicycle network, so families, younger kids, folks who just aren't comfortable cycling in a vehicle lane. And, you know, as I've been listening to the discussion tonight about should bike lanes be on Main Street, should, you know, we route bicyclists on some of the side streets, I just had some thoughts on that particular issue. One is, as a cyclist who bikes in downtown quite frequently, I'm just skeptical that our off Main Street street network would support north-south travel. You really have to weave through parking lots and, you know, off street to actually move about our downtown if you're not willing to bike on Main Street. So I think that'd be difficult to do, establishing that off Main Street bicycle network. And I think one of the key reasons for allocating space on Main Street is, you know, I think for folks who use cycling as for utilitarian purposes, for transportation as opposed to recreation, we value convenience as much as anyone else. You know, there's been some discussion tonight about how, you know, motorists might not be willing to walk 4 blocks, you know, or a quarter mile from a parking lot to a downtown establishment. I mean, cyclists are humans too, and if we make it more difficult to reach our downtown businesses on bike, folks aren't going to choose that option as frequently as they would if it were convenient to cycle up and down Main Street. And the more folks use our cycling infrastructure, that actually will improve the experience of motorists. I think it's been said already tonight, you know, every time I cycle down to Main Street to eat or shop, that's a parking spot that I'm not occupying for someone who might be traveling from further away. So I just want to emphasize that point that these different modes of transportation really work in concert with one another. The more folks are cycling to our downtown, the more room there will be for motorists traveling from further away. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Rebellard?
Hi, I'm Mark Rebellard. I'm a resident of Keene. I live at 64 Blackberry Lane. I own a business downtown. I'm chair of the Keene Downtown Group. I produce the Keene Ice and Snow Festival. I'm not speaking for the downtown group, I'm speaking as a citizen. You know, I had a speech prepared, but I want to commend you guys for getting to some real debate here tonight and really getting into the nuts and bolts of this, and that's the job of this council, and thank you. With particular regard, I want to comment on a few things that I heard tonight about the soul of downtown. And I feel like in support of the park project downtown, the Rotary, that I'm fighting for the soul of downtown. Soul isn't a traffic pattern, you know. Soul is a community gathering space that's been throughout history. And I won't go into the details, but you know, if you look back far enough, you see that before it was taken over by cars, and before, as Councilor Giacomo said, that there's this, before that gem of a park got encircled by cars, there used to be all kinds of things going on all around it, because you know, when cars were first introduced there, they would go around that thing any which way, and we could shut down the streets any way we wanted. But as they've slowly taken over, you know, you look to a picture in the 50s, there's an information booth right out on the corner of that park where people would pull up to it. How quaint, right? To get information. You can't do that anymore. The cars have taken over, and we've allowed that to happen for these last 50, 60 years because that's been the nature. Think about multimodal. You know, in 2010, when people were asked to look forward into what they wanted for downtown Keene, they talked about multimodal access. They talked about walkability. And I'm encouraged to see Councilor Jones here with a copy of the master plan. You know, that's, you know, they recognize the gem that is this square. Yeah, absolutely. They recognize the gem that is that square, but, you know, it doesn't change by making it into a park. And I also want to talk about the idea of circuits, right? This was introduced to me at an engineering meeting that was put on by Arts Alive, right? That if you think about Portsmouth, right? People park somewhere and they walk all over that city. And why do they do it? Because there's another place to go. There's another business to go to. There's another thing to happen. When we create that park that extends up to Washington and Court, we are creating a circuit. And we're creating a circuit that's going to encourage people to keep walking and keep visiting those businesses up there. The difference between, and I've been told this over and over as part of the downtown group, the difference between being just off Main Street and being on Main Street is threefold in business. And you can talk to anybody who's done it, who's moved from off Main Street to Main Street, their business picks up. We need to improve that traffic, we need to expand that traffic, and I believe this proposal does just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger?
Nice. Hello, testing. Hey, I'm going to read something, otherwise I'll be talking for more than 3 minutes, which I can't do. I want to just share some thoughts about why a pedestrian-friendly downtown is so critical for us to think about developing. That's our development project, pedestrian-friendly, in my mind. And infrastructure, because I have a building and I like when the water flows, et cetera, et cetera. As a Keene taxpayer, though, I have great respect for the city staff and totally trust that this project will be carefully funded and managed by them. They have my support, and I know they'll do a super diligent job, and that's important to have faith in our staff. We've got an incredible staff in the city. And then really glad that the council is basically addressing the downtown infrastructure project as a whole group, with each individual member doing their own due diligence and research, because there's a lot still to answer for ourselves. And regardless of past protocols and where this should go or not go, the scope and nature of this project really demands the active participation of each council member, like every step of the way. So thank you all for doing that. It's really cool. Little story, I first met Barry Crown, the eminent roundabout designer from the UK, when he came to Keene in the 1990s to design our 2 large roundabouts. And I was talking with him one day with some other folks in front of City Hall, and he pointed over towards the flagpole, south of the Commons, and he said, hey, you could fit a roundabout there. And my comment at the time was, why bother? We already have a roundabout here. And he turned to me and he says, no, what you have is a beautiful island in the middle of a sea of swarming cars. And then went on to explain how we could connect our seldom used island to the mainland, eliminate the cars and traffic in front of the church, and create a real destination for people. I did not get it. Now I get it. The vibrancy of our city is really affected by the retail businesses that remain here, and more so by the restaurants. But the real increased vitality that many downtowns in the country are now experiencing is being steadily enriched by the growth of their downtown resident populations. So we know when more people decide to live in a downtown, the area begins to prosper. Downtown residents come home after work, and they take over when the business owners and restaurants go home. And they really bring in a high level of activity and pride, and really infuse the area with their own values. So that's coming our way. It hasn't happened, but it's coming our way. With the construction of the new apartments at the Mill, the old middle school, and we've seen that influx of new downtown residents markedly. Marlborough Street, there's a planned housing project that's going to add several floors to a big building. At Good Fortune, we're thinking about putting 2 floors of apartments or condos above our building. So this is like a big step for people to think of as developers, and I'm not a big developer, but we see how small cities the size of ours around the country are growing, not because of all their businesses or restaurants, but because people come in and inject energy. So it's all about the people. And I don't mean like people like me who can say I've worked here downtown for 30 years, or people who can say I've lived in Keene for 50 or 70 years. This project is really for the benefit of our future residents who don't even live here. And even those who live here, the most important stakeholders in our community haven't even stepped up to the microphone or given their input. And these are the residents of our city who are basically around 10 years old. And they'll tell you what they think if we ask them, but they may not have the whole picture like we've got it, but...
All right, thanks, Roger. I gotta
Okay, and those are the folks that are going to basically inherit our city. So next 10 years, let's give them something that'll make them stay in Keene. And let's roll up our sleeves, participate in the workshop, and your task is to decide what is best for Keene in the future, not the present. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to me talk so fast.
Pam Slack.
Is that hard to get my name out, George? Anyway, my mother's name has been mentioned here so many times tonight, I feel like she's in the room. And honestly, she'd actually be pretty proud of this meeting. And I know she's asked some of you to run for council before, and some of you served under her. So I know the park's going to be opening up soon. That may be a very good possibility of where events could be held. But I do have a couple other things I wanted to add, which is why I couldn't write them all down, and I hope I don't talk for more than 3 minutes because I actually don't like it. So I wanted to address biking. My father never drove a car. My father rode his bike to work every single day, which was right down on 87 Main Street. Did he come down Main Street? Nope. Went through the back way. Never rode, very rarely, ever rode his bike down Main Street. It was much too dangerous. So I did want to say that. The other thing I want to talk about is what is the sole business of, what is the soul of Keene? The soul of Keene is the small businesses downtown. That's the soul. That's what we need to keep in mind. I grew up with a family business downtown. I've been through many disruptions through downtown when my father's business was there. People need to remember that the soul of the downtown are the small businesses. That's why people come here. That's my second thing. My other thing is I would like to see the council and the city manager to look at the project this way. A must-have and do some type of cost analysis. So it would be a must-have, a should-do, and a nice-to-do. Because we know that there are things that need to be done downtown. The water and sewer pipes need to be fixed. We know that. We don't know how much there is to it. That's a must-do. But I'm sure I don't need to say what the should-do is. or the nice to do. For me, the nice to do is changing the square. That's a nice to do thing. Is it needed? Do we need to pay for it? In my opinion, nope. But I think we need a cost analysis to find out, you know, how much that's going to cost the taxpayers. I know that the city's looking at grants, loans, bonds, but the least impact at this most difficult time after coming out of COVID is the least impact to the taxpayer. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Debbie Bowie.
I'm Debbie Bowie, and I'm a resident of Keene. Mayor Hansel and the City Council, I want to thank everybody who gave consideration to my March 8th letter to the City Council and the Mayor. There's many unanswered questions. It's clear to me that the water and sewer are a priority. But the cost to taxpayers needs to be considered, and it needs to be clear. So we also need to think about the cost and the implications to the businesses and what will happen to those businesses during this period of time. The safety concerns are a must. They have to be a #1 priority. The police, the fire, the bicycles, the pedestrians and the cars all need to be given consideration. What I'd like to see and what I requested in my letter is a clear report on changes that are agreed to, that can be given to Keene residents and to businesses to really understand this project. And that will give transparency to what's happening. One other thing that I've questioned, where is the grant money for these extra costs? And do you have it? You know, grants are difficult to get sometimes, and they're not a given. So I don't know that we can rely on that money that might be out there. So I think we need to look at what we need to do. And I really appreciate if you've given consideration to the letter that I wrote back on March 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Haas.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, thanks for having me tonight. Scott, with due apologies, I'm a big cyclist. I cycle all over Main Street, all around the square, all the time. If you're a cyclist and you're riding properly, you belong in the traffic lanes downtown. You belong riding with the traffic and obeying the rules. If this idea of pastoral views of dedicated bike lanes for kids and families riding their bikes, that doesn't happen. What happens in those bikes are, somebody mentioned scooters before, the electric scooters come in, the e-bikes come in. E-bikes can go up to 28 miles an hour now. Can you picture e-bikes in these bike lanes, no matter how protected they are? It can't be protected. There's all kinds of other things that will happen with bike lanes. If you protect them, if you raise them, they're tripping hazards, it goes on and on. It's been mentioned, but for the couple, 3 blocks we're talking about here, people can walk their bikes. If you're not comfortable riding into traffic like bicyclists do everywhere else, they can walk their bikes for those 3 blocks. We could do lots of things with bike lanes around the perimeter, elsewhere in town, as we do, but in those 3 blocks, please no bike lanes. Pedestrian friendly, great. We want to make this more of a pedestrian area, that's great, let's do it. But bike lanes would be so bad. The e-bikes will come in, it'll be a disaster. The other thing I want to talk about is the idea of traffic circles, rotaries, roundabouts. They're great. They work on the highways. They work on busy streets. They work down by the college. They're not going to work here because of the pedestrian flow that goes across it. You have traffic lights now that shut the traffic down so pedestrians can cross. What's going to happen then? You're going to have a roundabout. Pedestrians come up, push the button, traffic stops. It's going to be the same thing as having traffic lights. It's better to have the traffic lights. The roundabouts will create more pedestrian hazards than anything as pedestrians find their way trying to cross it. I asked Stantec at the meeting at the library if they could model the traffic flow and pedestrian flow, and I didn't get a straight answer. They haven't done that. So if anybody really wants to go that route, open roundabouts, let's model pedestrian flow and traffic flow at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Hartz.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Peter Hartz. I live on Brook Street downtown for the last 30 years. I've worked downtown for most of that time until I retired. So I've traveled through downtown at least 4 times a day, every day of my life since 1987. And there are a few things that I'd like to comment on. One is the traffic circle, as they proposed. There are 5 busy streets entering that tiny little traffic circle, complete with tractor trailers and delivery trucks. I just cannot imagine how that's going to work. It boggles my mind to think how I saw a tractor trailer driving with a pulled behind trailer with a backhoe on it. It would decimate that little thing. Also, to keep into consideration that the flagpole would probably have to be moved. Where would that go? And also, it will eat into the gazebo area, a few feet, take a little chunk out, and that's where the Christmas tree is every year. So moving on, bicycles. Well, it's been said before, and I don't want to reiterate, it's 4 blocks at the most. We could put bike racks either end, in the middle, lots of bike racks. If you can get there, chain your bike up and walk. We're supposed to be a walkable city, so let's do it. The event situation. Keene, everybody remembers the Pumpkin Fest. What was the number on the people that came to Pumpkin Fest? 20,000? 40,000? I don't know, more? We did that for years without any problem whatsoever, except at the very end, and that wasn't even about the Pumpkin Fest. Special events, I've been to special events downtown many times. We do it. We close the streets off, people work around it, everybody has a nice time. There's another special event space that is never used, which was built recently behind the Manana Co-op, the enclosed area with a stage. I never see anybody down there doing anything. I just think we have to get our priorities right, and somebody else mentioned that the small businesses are the priority, and I remember when downtown was pretty dead. It's the early 90s. Oh, whoops, yellow light. Well, thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you. Jim Sterling?
Hi. Thanks for this opportunity. My name's Jim Sterling. Born and bred in Keene. I'm a proponent of bike lanes. I think that it's probably the fastest growing mode of transportation as far as the different methods of transportation around here. I think it would really be a terrible idea not to include them, protected bike lanes. I find it strange that every business owner wants to have parking spaces in front of their business, but they don't want the bikes to drive by them. I find, on one hand, people are saying, we can walk our bikes up the street, but they want parking for the people that drive autos right in front of their businesses. I mean, bikers shop also, and why make it so hard for them? I've heard people talk about electrics. Electrics are coming. Some demographics, electrics outsold regular bikes 2-to-1 last year. The main demographic age-wise for electric bikes is 40 years old to 70 years old. Electric bikes are to bikes what pickleball is to tennis. And so they're coming one way or the other. Even mobility scooters are improving. I was at Price Chopper the other day in January and met a gentleman who drove down the rail trail, which got me to believe that, developers will start to develop along the rail trails just because of the mode of transportation. But When they get to downtown, it's like, stop. I call the rail trail when we get to downtown a bike dam. You can't go left, you can't go right. You're supposed to portage. And it just doesn't seem to make sense. And when you think of the cost of the bike lanes, virtually there's no additional cost. It's going to be tar or concrete or whatever. I talked to the consultants. Other than a little paint and maybe some signage, that's all the cost. And also that helps us obtain different grants by being multimodal. So it's probably a moneymaker for the town as opposed to something that's going to be costing money. So I just hope that we get the bike lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. Roland?
Thank you for this opportunity. Roland Russell. I live in Keene, High Street. I'm a history geek. I own books of almost all the towns in Cheshire County, and I read them avidly. And I've read almost every word that's been written about Keene. I love the history of this place, and I have done a lot to celebrate it with Wall Dogs and with the work I continue to do with the Historical Society. But when you boil down what's in the history of Keene, you come down to one common element of all the changes that have happened over time here: innovation. We are one of the most innovative places, not just in Cheshire County, but in the state. That is what we try to celebrate, every day with what we do at the Historical Society and what we did with the Wall Dogs, is celebrating the great businesses that are here and the great businesses that are still here. But innovation is always going to mean change. Probably the single place in Keene that has changed the most is actually Central Square over time. Ironically, with this construction, we'll be more like we were in 1847 before the trees were planted with no pavement. But we have the chance to build it back the way, not just that we want it now or the way we remembered it from the past, but the way people a generation or two down the line will want to see it, will want to come here to be here. There's study after study that indicates the economic benefits of arts, of the downtown dining, protected bike lanes, recreation trails, multimodal transportation options, and arts, a dedicated space for a commons. The Central Square is our commons, and too many people can't reach it, not safely. So if we're thinking about the future generations and we want to pass on this history to them and to the wonderful things that we have now, we also have to be thinking about how this infrastructure work helps us address very pressing problems that I have not heard talked about by City Council tonight: climate change and all the other attendant issues that we're having. So there's a great opportunity here to begin addressing those things, both with how water flows, how it is channeled, but also how we promote infrastructure changes like bikes and pedestrian-friendly and electronic bikes and electronic cars. 25 years from now, we will probably not have gas-guzzling vehicles. So I encourage you to think about those future generations in planning for now.
Thank you. Tom Savastano?
Hi, I'm Tom Savastano. I live on Winter Street, which is, I live just about a block from downtown. And I've lived in Keene for 8 years now, and so I'm a relative newcomer. And I really want to thank the City Council for the work that you're putting into this and the careful consideration and deliberation I've heard tonight. I wanted to say that I've tried to come at I want to speak especially about Central Square. I've wanted to come at this from a neutral perspective, and I've looked at the Stantec plans. I went to the library information session, And it was interesting because I thought, gee, this is it's an interesting idea they have, with a mini roundabout and everything. And but then I saw two pictures that were presented as part of the presentation, and they were conceptual, like overviews of what it looks like now versus what it would look like with the mini roundabout. And I realized that really the central focus with the new plans would become that little roundabout of cars constantly going around, rather than this, big space that we have for Central Square. And I was reminded of a comment that a friend of mine said when he heard we were moving to Keene 8 years ago. He lived in Hollis, New Hampshire, and he used to love to go to different places in New Hampshire and everything. And he said to me, "Oh, you're moving to Keene, that's famous for the keyhole." And I kind of knew what he meant, and but I said, "Well, why don't you elaborate on that?" And he said, "Well, yeah." He said the Central Square and the Main Street coming down from it looks like a historical keyhole, in a historic house, like many of us have historic houses, and there's old houses in Keene, and those keyholes that you put the skeleton key in. And he said, "Yeah." He said, Keene is famous for that." And I said to myself, "Oh, that's an interesting picture, And I think that you'd really change a lot more than you should to go for the Stantec plan as it relates to Central Square. I really encourage you to keep Central Square largely the way it is with the improvements and to do all the infrastructure that's needed and everything. So thank you again for your work and all your deliberations, and appreciate this consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Dory?
Hi, folks. I'm going to make this as quick as I can because I only have 3 minutes. All I ask is, as fast as I'm going to speak tonight, I ask that city councilors take notes because it's going to be quick. Our city grant application, in it, it states that a third party approached us. They came up with an idea to change our downtown. Once that was heard, we formed a committee that was handpicked by our mayor. Think about that as the result we got out of this committee was to change our downtown. A counselor spoke that a new system will last 50 years, and the current one that we have is only 35, maybe 50 or 40 years old. So that gives us a good 10 years to come up with a good plan. Counselor Omarad mentioned a leakage rate. I've never heard of that. I'm not familiar, but now I'm very concerned, as I imagine the 1,500 followers of Save the Square would also be. Can you please request a study be done so that we're more aware? We talked about Concord. Do we know what the after effects of the Concord project was? How many lawsuits resulted out of that project? How many businesses have closed? Is there a study? And if not, at the cost of $10 million, you should ask for one. We can attempt to get approval for a grant for infrastructure, but nothing should be done until we know we have been approved for all the grants that we've applied for. We can't promise our taxpayers one thing and then do another. We all deserve to know where our money is going. Business interruption and impact is huge. It's in every grant application. We're telling the government that this is huge. We are pushing, if we're saying that it's huge, why are we pushing small businesses out? Where is an economic study from the devastation we plan on doing? The roundabout study, safety, history, and functionality. This is a study that MSFI needs to demand. Loss of one life for the safety is too many. Why would we risk it? It works, it's beautiful, and we currently use it with few complaints until this project was brought up. As for our common, green space and event space, is there a safety study for pedestrians and traffic deferment? Emergency management? We deserve better from our city in the way of safety. What is best? Lights, bells, whistles? We don't know, and we won't know until there's a study. Time and money and materials. We could work 24/7 in 3 shifts, huge contractors with subcontractors. It can't be done in a year, and it can't be done in 2 unless someone has an inside contract, and that would lead to disaster. What is the plan for contractors, and where are they getting their employees from? Because our city, along with many employers, large and small, have had openings for positions for quite some time with no results in years. I agree with Mitch. This isn't urgent. You need to explain to us why it is urgent. Our mayor was incorrect when he told the public about the wooden pipes, and that came from the city engineer, also our assistant city manager. My concerns about Stantec, who runs it and why did they approach us? Has the city done their homework on this company? It seems that a simple Google search would make us consider other companies. We need to keep our citizens more of a priority than a Canadian company that approached us to change our beloved city. City manager, you can roll your eyes. It's rude and disrespectful. I'm a member of this community. Don't correct me because I'm right.
You need
Have
to-
a reason
you need to wrap it up.
interrupt me.
You're out of
Parking,
time.
what are we thinking? Can we please do a study, not a Stantec study, a specialist with
Ms.
no
Maston,
connection?
you're out of time. I'm
Thank
going to
you.
ask you to wrap it up. Thank you. Peter Espios.
Good evening, folks. I've lived in Keene, I live at 29 Middle Street. My name is Peter Espiev. I've lived in Keene for about 50 years, and I love the downtown of Keene. You've got an iconic, historic arrangement here, and you don't really want to break it down. Now, you've got some problems that you're dealing with, and I think you can handle them this way. You need a better light controlling arrangement down here, and you need some police presence too. That makes a difference, because we got a lot of people coming from out of town, and they see no policemen around, and they see a wide open roundabout thing, and they're gonna run around there as fast as they can. Well, you have a policeman standing in the square here, or at least a couple of these guys, and that makes a big difference. At least it makes them think about what they're gonna do. They're not gonna use this as a racing arrangement. The bike lanes. The bike lane might be a good idea somewhere else, but I see it as a liability to the city, really. There's all kinds of things. You're gonna have to maintain the bike lane. It's gonna have to be safe. And I don't see that being something that you want to get into. The bike, I think the bike industry is a good industry, but they're not doing much in terms of educating bicycle people. And we're walking down the main streets in Keene, and we're close to getting killed every once in a while by somebody whizzing by. Now, that's got to stop. I hope that you can digest some of these points and do what's right for Keene. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Espios. Cora Elliott? Is Cora available? Want to speak? No? Ted McGreer? Man, you have worse handwriting than I do, Ted.
Hi, everybody. Ted McGreer, 18 Forest View Road, Keene. I'm a business owner downtown, and I'm a property owner downtown. I think this workshop was great. I think the sentiment here was really cordial, and I appreciate it. I want to say that I've heard a lot of discussion about Keene's downtown retail sector being less important than it used to be because people shop online. So Keene is now an arts, entertainment, and a dining downtown. And I really want to take offense to that because we are a downtown dining and shopping destination. We still have retailers down here, and I'm a retailer, and we're fighting the good fight. And we're fighting it against Amazon and online, and you know what? We're all hanging in there pretty well. So grateful to be a business owner down here. And I'll share this, that as it relates to the retractable pylons, is that what we call them, or banisters? I think those are a terrific idea. Because we can still have events down here. One of the biggest costs when I was on the Let It Shine board was the Jersey barriers, $50,000, $60,000 to bring those barriers down and close off the streets for the events. So that's a terrific idea, and I hope we can execute that. Yeah, downtown merchants and restaurants and the entertainment culture, I mean, we all love the city so much, and we are the soul of downtown. And I just pray that, you know, that the shorter amount of time for this project the more damage it's going to be to our businesses. So I think that 3-year plan is probably best, in my opinion, to mitigate the damages as best we can. So thank you.
Thank you. James Huntley? James? Yep.
Hi, Jim Huntley, Marguerite Street in Keene. There are some things I think that shouldn't change. And simply because we're better off the way they are, we get more benefit from them the way we are. You wouldn't change the green monster at Fenway Park, I think, just for the sake of doing it. It'd be an awful trouble to do it. It's an icon. Outside our window, downtown Keene is an icon. We should treat it that way. We're sitting here saying, should we tear it up? Should we turn it into something else? Can we make it better? It's pretty darn good the way it is. It works for us. You can, somebody asks you where you're from, Keene. Oh yeah, I've been there. That's the place with the big church, the common? Yeah, that's what's remembered. You can drive down West Street and 2 minutes later you forget it. West Street is USA anywhere. Every town, every city in the country has its West Street. Fast food, gas stations, box, they're fine. I have nothing wrong with them. In fact, Keene's is somewhat better than a lot of other places. But what you remember is downtown, Central Square. My wife was from Marblehead. If you know Marblehead or not, it's sort of a new town and an old town. You forget the new town right off quick. The old town, you gotta turn your mirrors in if you're gonna drive by, or you may be knocking them off, or you gotta move over to let the traffic go by. Been this way for years, but the restaurants are busy, the stores are busy, it's full of tourists, everybody gets along fine. And I don't see what, I've been driving around Central Square since I was 16 years old, and that's a long time ago now. And I've never had any problem. It seems like it can be done pretty easily. Takes a little getting used to one time. It may be a little inconvenient at times, but that look, that iconic look of downtown Keene is what makes Keene. That's what we're known by. When parents come in to Keene looking for colleges, they look at Keene State, say, this is nice, but they look at this town and say, I wouldn't mind having my kids go here. This is a good place to go to school. We're building a place in Peerless, Cheshire Med Center. People going out there now would be looking at this town and say, not a bad place to live. I think that image, that iconic image of Keene is worth a lot, and we shouldn't destroy it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the members of the public that showed up to speak and listen and participate. And I know that that will continue as the council moves forward with this project. At this time, I would just ask, I'd look for consensus from the council. Do you want to take advantage of the April 11th day that's been reserved for another workshop, or what do you want to do? Go ahead.
PLD has a microphone. Oh, I'm sorry. I believe that PLD has a meeting on the 10th and a meeting on the 12th that week. And I'm hoping that when we meet, we'll be able to have some updated design potential possibilities and some answers to some of these questions. And I think we might need a little more time.
So the 26th is the next one? Does everyone want to move ahead with another workshop, get some feedback from the staff from what they've heard from today, and we'll maybe schedule, I agree with Councilor Bosley. I think giving a little bit of time is not going to hurt necessarily. Good with that? Okay. All right, thank you all.
I'm sorry, I have one question.
Yep.
Is this another public workshop?
Same thing, basically.
Okay, same exact thing. Okay, thanks.
What is the date?
26.
The April 26th is when this room is reserved, so it'll be the same kind of thing, probably a little more back and forth between the council and the staff to get some information out there. All right, thank you all for your time and attention tonight. I appreciate it. I think that was very, very helpful, and we stand adjourned for tonight.
Good job.